Howdy, folks, and thank you all so very much for joining us here again on Expanded Perspectives with me, Cam Hale, and joining me as always, es mi amigo doing his katas over here across from me, Kyle Filson.
Buddha bless, Buddha bless.
He's working his katas over here.
Right. Me and the boys watched IP Man 1 and 2 this week. Now, if you're not familiar with this and you have Netflix, I suggest you try it out. Now, it is in Chinese, so you have to do a lot of subtitle reading, but the battle scenes are amazing. I love the Kung Fu movies, and they're just at the perfect age where they think people really do fight like that.
I love it.
So we watch it. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. I still find myself, though, enjoying it. I mean, the guy fights like 300 people.
Yeah.
They all have knives, weapons. He don't need them.
He don't need it.
I mean, first of all, he doesn't even get tired.
He doesn't get, you know why? He's a beast. I even went to the movies to watch Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon on the one reason, because they were jumping and you could hear their clothes flapping when they fly through the air.
Yeah.
And they were like barely hopping through the bamboo. I love that. I can't help it. I love it. It's because of watching all the old Kung Fu movies, like they used to come on at lunch, like on Saturdays when cartoons was over. Because, shocker, for everybody that's way younger than us that's listening, cartoons weren't on 24/7, y'all. It used to only come on from like 6 a.m. to like 12 on a Saturday. And outside of that, you didn't get to see cartoons.
We didn't have cartoon channels specifically.
No, there was no such thing as sleeping in. You had to get up early. You had to walk 2 miles in the snow uphill both ways to get to a TV just in order to watch cartoons.
Yeah. When I remember watching those Kung Fu films on Saturdays like you're talking about, and I still like them. I still have a collection of some.
I love them. I love them.
Shaolin Temple Strikes Back, the 36 Chambers, all that
They're
stuff.
all on Netflix, too. So I just click them on and walk away. I'm like, I just got to watch it. That's it.
The boys, what's funny is I don't tell them anything, and they already pick up. They're like, man, the guy's mouth doesn't match what he's saying. You know, they can tell the little
You're like,
things.
it's okay.
And then
it's
you have to
okay.
explain to them the dubbing and things like that. But
Yeah.
it is pretty neat. And outside of that, we had a fun weekend, me and the boys. We just kind of hung out. My wife was busy doing things with her sister most of the weekend. So it was boys' night. Me and the three bruds. We watched movies and we hung out. It was
Stayed up
really
late.
a lot of fun. But I want to move on to one of the stories in the news. A bunch of fans of ours, of course, and I really appreciate it. They started sending me this video of a UFO apparently spotted over Los Angeles. Now, the story goes that some people are on top of a parking garage or something, and they were taking some pictures of the night sky, and they caught what looks like a UFO. And this thing went viral, and it's crazy. And I watched it, and I have to tell you, the first few seconds, I'm like, well, it looks like a dot. I'm not sure what that is. But then after I see the plume, I suspected that it was a missile test, and in fact, it is. The actual Navy came out with an official statement. And, of course, I'll put links to this video in the show notes. You might want to check it out. It is pretty cool looking. But the Navy's official statement came from the fleet commander named Ryan Perry.
I got you.
And he admits that it was a Naval Strategic Systems program conducted, and they were testing the Trident II missile. And this was from the USS Kentucky, which is an Ohio-class submarine in the Pacific Test Range, which is just off the coast of Southern California. The tests were part of a scheduled, ongoing system evaluation tests, and they say that launches are conducted on a frequent, reoccurring basis to ensure the continued reliability of the system. Each test activity provides valuable information about our systems, thus contributing to assurance in our capabilities. The missile that everybody saw was not armed, and it says that they routinely do not announce when they're going to be testing these missiles. So basically, it's a way of keeping everybody on their toes. I guess they plan these, it's like doing a tornado drill.
Mm-hmm.
You're basically running a drill. You're testing out the launch sequences, the codes, the keys. You know, what is it? The EAM comes in, you got to break it, and you got to match through the code. You know,
right.
You've seen the movies.
Yeah.
And they're basically testing this thing, and it does look like a rocket, and that's all it was. But it was a pretty cool video. It reminded me, though, when I saw that. Are you aware of the Norway Spiral? Have you seen that video?
Yep,
now,
I have.
that, man, I don't know what that is, but that's pretty cool. I'll try to put links to that if you haven't seen that, but you might want to check that out. But anyways, if you thought you saw a UFO that was filmed over Los Angeles, it just happens to be missiles being tested.
If you buy that.
If you buy that. Or they immediately came out with trying to say, let's just tell them it was a missile test.
Right.
It does look like a missile.
It does. Well, I was in San Angelo watching my niece play basketball at the San Angelo University down there, and you and I was talking about this some, and I was getting messages on this whole thing. I was watching it. I'm like, what the heck is it? I wasn't keeping up with it much. I left that all up to Kyle, but I did find something else. We were talking, a friend of ours has got a drone, and a nice drone. So if we start doing some filming coming up, we're going to have him do a little filming with his drone. But when I was just bouncing around checking out, I always look at drone stuff in the news now. I have no idea why. this actually comes from Discovery.com. There was a floating drone that's been made now, and it's used to harvest algae for fuel. Apparently, excess algae is actually a problem in the Baltic Sea. And I had no idea of this, but this actually comes from a Swedish industrial design student named Fredrik Oschentz. He says he envisions a way to clean and remove excess algae that abnormally frequent the large algae blooms that's in the Baltic Sea that they say that produces all the toxic chemicals, these toxins that kill off marine life. This thing looks awesome. Okay, so you've got to imagine this. It's like a remote control lawnmower, for the lack of a better word. Now, it says the design calls for hydrogen fuel cell technology with 2 electric-driven pumps, one on each side. And it says it makes the vessel very quiet. Now, he actually has a project page where he talks about this. But basically, moving along the water's surface, so there's an internal system, separates the biomass from the water. And the water helps with the thrust, while the heat emitted from the hydrogen fuel cell dries the algae out. And this is what he says here. This is his quote. The concept works similar to a lawnmower, so the algae shouldn't drift behind the machine. It's operated with an external cockpit located in a service boat nearby, and it has adjustable hydrodynamic wings, and they allow for collection of about 1.5 meters deep. It looks awesome. And when I look at this whole thing, but this is the first thing I thought is, you know how cool that is? There is a few uses here for something along these lines. So the first thing I thought of is a good way of using these drones is, what about another fuel spill, an oil spill? Well, they have drones that they can get out and actually drive that will collect the oil and maybe make it I don't know. I know I'm talking ridiculous just because I don't understand how it works. But what I'm saying is, do they have a way of collecting it to where they could collect it, bring it back and put it in a spot, or collect it and then kick out containers and those could gather them back up? I think there's something along this lines to where this is where it's going to end up going.
That's awesome. I love the drones, except for the attack of the drones.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm hoping that this is something along those. Now, I know that there is actually like some timber harvesting drones that they use, kind of like a hovercraft, where you don't have to get the big equipment up in there. You know, the tracks and all that will actually devastate the side of a mountain, cause erosion and things like that, where they're trying to get the trees and then replant new ones. But they got them where they hover, just on air thrust, and then they still do their cutting and what they need to get without tearing up the ground.
That's
I know
crazy.
They're beginning to look. I say beginning to use them. They're going to use them for good. They're also going to use them to take over the world. Either way.
Yeah, at least you know that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're able to recognize that.
Elon Musk is terrified by it. If you read up what he doesn't think AI is a good thing, I'm on Team Musk. I'm with him.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
There's no way to get away from it. So everybody just get him an EMP and let's get ready.
Oh, that was pretty neat. Let's take a break here. When we get back from the break, I'm going to get into some of these possessed vehicles. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives.
All right, folks, we are back. We're going to have a little fun discussing stuff. Me and Kyle have been talking about this off and on, and then he kind of popped it on me out of the blue here recently. It's a very interesting subject matter, really and truly. I mean, it really is. It's a strange, strange thing. But before we get into that, I'm going to bring up a few things so we all kind of get in the groove together before we start talking about anything, I guess you could say, haunted or possessed vehicles.
Yeah.
It's not an original idea. They did make it into some movies. Now, let me ask you this, Kyle.
Sure.
Did you remember seeing the movie? I know the ones you have, but I don't remember ever you talking about this. I've never seen it. It's called The Car from 1977.
No, I've never even heard of it.
I never had either, but apparently there is what they say, a rampaging, murderous car. It says, here's what it comes from, like the movie poster says, is it a phantom, a demon, or the devil himself? There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nowhere to stop the car.
Wow. Now, the first movie I ever saw that introduced me to the possibility, which is what's so funny, is just the possibility that a car could be possessed, was the movie Christine, of course.
Yes.
But what is it that we, as people, as a society, we believe that ships can be haunted, like these ghost ships. Mm-hmm. We believe that a house can be haunted, or a prison, or even like a sanitarium can become haunted, mm-hmm. or a cemetery. But we don't like to entertain the idea that a vehicle, or a train, or a bus, or an airplane, these all can be haunted, right?
How old were you when you saw that movie? I was real young. I remember, I think the first time I saw that.
I was pretty young.
I just remember I looked it up, and it was a 1958 Plymouth Fury was what that car was. Let me ask you, though, this. And there's a reason I'm going to ask you about this one, too. What about Maximum Overdrive? You remember?
Oh, yeah, that was with Emilio, right?
Where
like, Emilio!
It's supposed to be like, what was it, where the world went through like the tail of a comet, and it made things come to life, like lawnmowers and all that stuff?
Yeah, remember? It's been a long time since I've seen it. I just remember there was like a huge flat-nosed like semi-truck that was like driving. Yes. He was like held captive like in a gas station or something. Yes. Yeah, I forgot all about that movie.
Well, the reason I bring it up is one thing that I always remember, and it's because I had read I don't remember if it was like an interview excerpt or something at one time, but they were actually talking to Stephen King about when he wrote this whole thing, when he wrote Maximum Overdrive.
And he wrote Christine, too.
Yes, he did.
So,
He said when he wrote all that, he was coked out of his mind through the entire production of the movie, and he didn't really know what he was doing.
I've heard stories where a lot of his books, the really good ones, he was heavily under the influence of alcohol, as well as, like you're saying, cocaine and things.
I ain't hating.
I'm not hating either. Well, what is it that makes so many musicians and artists and other things like that are heavily into drugs? And it seems like that being whatever that enhances, it gives them the ability to kind of reach a different plane that you just can't in a normal consciousness.
You and I make jokes about this, and I know it's not the right thing to make jokes about, and I'm sure everybody else out there has probably done the same, or at least felt the same way. Is you always have a favorite band?
Yeah.
And then when that favorite band gets clean, you're like, there goes their music.
Well, it's true, though.
But you know what I mean? It's a horrible thing to say, but it does seem like when they all decide to go straight and get, everything where they're not all junkies and drunks, you're like, well, it's almost like it takes you to the darkness. It takes you into a spot like that. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something to it. I mean, it's like,
well, you're right.
When you look at what Stephen King wrote, I mean, there's some darkness to that.
And also that, like, people like to bring up, like you were talking about with the bands, I always hear people say, like, Jimi Hendrix, could you imagine if Jimi Hendrix was still around, what he would have been capable of doing? I almost like it the way it did end up, because if he was still around, it probably would be really lousy music now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're probably right.
He hit his arc, and it was so good but he was only around for so short of a time. Same thing with, like, Nirvana or something. If they continued,
Stevie Ray,
it may not be so good. I mean, like the Rolling Stones. I love the Rolling Stones, okay? They've got a handful of songs that are amazing. Hey, then they got a ton of songs that are garbage.
What's the name of their newest album? That's exactly what I thought.
But you know what I mean? Yeah. So sometimes it's almost better that people have like a short life, and that's what makes it so amazing.
Yes.
But I mean, look, the list could go on and on.
And then you possess a vehicle.
Now that we're thinking about these dead musicians and things, we need to do an episode on. I'm sure you're aware of this. The mystery of the age 27.
Yeah.
Like there's a ton of people that die around the age. Luckily, I've made it past that.
Yeah. Maybe I'm going to be like to 47. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. But anyways, back to the possessed vehicles, specifically cars. They actually, if you get to looking into it, they go pretty far back into history, and practically back to the beginning of cars themselves. Let's get into some of these stories. What do you say?
Let's do this.
In 1897, 4 Austrian men, 3 of them brothers, formed a car company known as the Graf and Stift Company. The company was widely renowned for its automobiles and had indeed produced Austria's first cars. The company actually had its start by making bicycles. This was common in the early days. Henry Ford, as well as the Wright brothers, both started by making bicycles. By 1914, the company's cars were internationally known and considered to be luxury items and were highly sought after by wealthy business people, politicians, and other prestigious people. One such notable client was the Austrian Archduke, Franz Ferdinand, who in 1914 had purchased a top-of-the-line model, which was a 4-cylinder, large, red limousine with 6 seats and an open top, called the Graf and Stift Double Phaeton. Now, the Double Phaeton was this sleek, opulent car, and it was said that him and his wife, Sophie, would be making the trips around town being shown, driving in this car, being driven in this car. This is also the vehicle where they made their fateful trip to Yugoslavia at a time when tensions were running extremely high all across Europe. The royal couple had come to Sarajevo in Bosnia amidst this turmoil, with the entire continent a powder keg just ready to explode at the slightest provocation. The city of Sarajevo was no different, and there were numerous dangers lurking at every corner. From revolting anarchists to Serbian nationalists, the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire was living under the specter of violence, and it probably was not the best of times for the Austrian royalty to be visiting the area. On June 28, 1914, Ferdinand and his wife were making their way to a local hospital to visit some bystanders that were injured in a failed assassination attempt just a few days earlier. They approached the street corner in their brand new fancy Graf and Stift Phaeton. Unfortunately for them, this Phaeton stalled in front of a cafe, and a Yugoslavian anarchist and extremist just happened to be in that very same cafe. As he walked out, he was greeted by the sight of the Archduke just sitting there in his car. Several shots later, the Archduke and his wife were both dead. The only thing to come out unscathed from this encounter was the car itself. And while it was already a little spooky that the expensive new car had inexplicably stalled at just the right moment to lead to this assassination, this would not be the end of Ferdinand's car's dark work, and it would go on to cause more misery for a long string of subsequent owners. The first to acquire the car, an Austrian general named Poturiak. He reportedly was driven insane while driving it and would live out the rest of his years in an asylum. But he got off lucky, as he managed to avoid physical harm while owning it, the Phaeton. Many others were not so fortunate. One owner was a German military officer who, while driving the car, encountered 2 peasants who suddenly walked out into the road in front of him, causing him to swerve and crash into an oncoming tree, thus killing him. Sadly, the 2 peasants were also mowed down and killed in the incident, despite the officer's efforts to avoid them. The next owner of the car committed suicide shortly after acquiring it. After that, it passed to the governor of Yugoslavia, who had no end of bad luck with it as well. In his short ownership of the vehicle, he was involved in 4 separate accidents, gruesomely losing an arm in one of them. The governor would often lament that this car must be cursed. He convinced a skeptical surgeon friend of his to buy it off of him in order to prove that it wasn't. Weeks later, his friend flipped it over and was crushed to death underneath. Then again, later, when a Swiss race car driver bought it, he would have a similar accident, with the car flipping end over end, killing him in the process. Again, another purchaser was lined up, but he, too, was also killed when the car, which was being towed, mysteriously broke free and fell right on top of him. before he even had a chance to drive it. Even more unlucky was a Romanian owner who was driving the car to a wedding when it suddenly spun out of control and killed him and 5 friends who had been riding along with him. All things told, over a 12-year period, the Archduke Ferdinand's car would allegedly kill 13 people. So there you go. What do you think of that, Cam? I mean, everybody that was associated with the thing seemed to be killed by it, or at least where the one guy was driven insane. But even the car before it even claimed its first victim, brand new Phaeton. This is a state-of-the-art limousine, very nice, very prestigious. These guys have a record of producing an automobile that's, exquisite at the time, very dependable. And what are the chances that that car stalled in front of an extremist, an anarchist that was looking to kill the Archduke?
Yeah.
I mean, it was
that whole story too is a great story.
You've heard it before.
Up to that. Yeah. Leading up to that whole thing. First of all, what kind of friend is it to try to talk him into, it's not really haunted, Kyle. Why don't you go ahead and buy this car off of me, bro? It's not haunted. Come on,
Yeah, right.
I'm like, dude.
Not a very good
hey,
one.
man, the guy's just thinking about making a little money off of his friend is what it sounds like.
But, I mean, every time that a new owner had it, the thing would spin out of control, run into a tree and kill them, or flip over and kill them, or fall off of a winch or whatever and crush somebody. I mean, one guy was killed before he never even got to drive it. He bought the thing, it was being towed to his house, and then it fell off and killed him.
I don't understand it. I really, really don't understand it.
It's very bizarre.
Yes, very. I don't know. It's all of these are strange to me. But this is one of those things that, because what could possess, it's a vehicle, man.
Yeah.
It's a vehicle.
Yeah.
Look, you understand, like at a house, and that's for me. It's like there's like an essence of it laying around. I get that. But to a car, could it really happen? But there's a bunch of stories that are very, very strange.
Yeah. Now, perhaps the most well-known allegedly cursed car is, of course, the Porsche 550 Spider that was owned by the American actor James Dean. And this was actually christened, this car. It was called the Little Bastard, which is actually a nickname that would eventually be emblazoned on the side of the vehicle. Now, in the 1950s, Dean was at the height of his fame, and his films, Rebel Without a Cause, East of Eden, and Giant, had made him into a pulp culture icon at the time. And Dean was an avid racer. I don't know if you knew that, but many actors at that time performed a lot of their own stunts. I remember Steve McQueen was actually a racer and stuff. A lot of those guys did that. Paul Newman, I think, actually raced cars on the side. Anyways, Dean was an avid racer, and he purchased this Porsche 550 Spider, which only 90 had ever been made. And he bought it when he was working on the film East of Eden. Now, when Dean finally showed off his flashy new ride with all its upgrades to his friend and actor Alec Guinness, Guinness had reportedly had an immediate aversion to it. He said that the thing felt sinister. He also kind of jokingly told his friend Dean, "Man, that thing doesn't look very safe to me, and if you get in that Porsche, you'll be dead by next week." Eerily, that actually came true. Now, precisely 1 week later, on September 30th, 1955, Dean was scheduled to be in a race in Salinas, California. His mechanic, Rolf Lutherwick, convinced him that it would be a good idea to break the car in by driving it from Los Angeles to Salinas. And so the two headed out together in this car. Now, after already being ticketed once for speeding, the two of them continued on their way until a Ford Tudor suddenly made a turn into an intersection right in front of them. Unable to stop in time, Dean's car smashed into the Ford, practically head-on. The driver of the Ford escaped with only minor injuries, but Dean and his friend were not so lucky. His friend was catapulted out of the Porsche and sustained numerous injuries, including a broken jaw, while Dean himself remained in the total vehicle with the grievous life-threatening injuries, such as a broken neck. Although he was reported as having a weak pulse, when he was pulled from the wreckage, Dean would be pronounced dead on arrival at Paseo Robles War Memorial Hospital. Now, if that's not tragic enough, check out what happened next, Cam. From the very beginning, the wreck caused misfortune, reportedly falling and breaking both of a mechanic's legs as it was being moved from the crash site. The new owner went on to sell some of the parts from the car, with the engine going to a Californian physician named William Esrich, and the drivetrain going to a Dr. McHenry. Now, Esrich put the engine into a Lotus chassis, and while racing the hybrid in Sonoma, California, the car suddenly flipped over, inflicting serious injuries on the physician. Now, Dr. McHenry was even more unfortunate when in the very same race, he careened into a tree and died after the engine of his car suddenly and inexplicably stalled the vehicle and it became uncontrollable. It didn't stop there. In one story, a would-be thief is said to have severely cut his hands while trying to steal the steering wheel from the wreck. In another incident, 2 tires that had been sold to another driver allegedly simultaneously burst and caused the car to crash. The owner would go on to loan the wreck to the California Highway Patrol to be put on display as a safety warning to drivers, illustrating the disastrous consequences of careless driving. But whatever was possessing the car, it refused to stop. Within days of being exhibited at a garage, a major fire broke out that destroyed every vehicle stored there except Dean's Spider, which strangely came out of the accident remarkably unscathed. Now, as the wreck was being hauled off to be put on display at a local high school, the Spider broke free from the tow truck again and killed a woman who was standing nearby. Later, the little bastard went on to be displayed in Sacramento and was promptly slipped from its stand to break another person's hip. As it was being moved yet again, the driver of a flatbed truck that was carrying it, his name was George Barkaias, was involved in an accident and thrown from the vehicle. As he laid reeling in pain upon the pavement, the Spider fell from its trailer onto the injured driver, killing him instantly. In 1960, after seeming to sow mayhem wherever it went, the Spider was on its way to Los Angeles, and after a safety exhibit in Miami, Florida, it disappeared without a trace from the truck that was carrying it. And to this day, it is unknown what happened to that Spider and where it eventually ended up. Now, is that not crazy? All the deaths, again, associated and injuries associated with this car. I mean, it's like everywhere it goes, it just keeps hurting people, even when they parted the thing out. What's craziest is in the one race, there was 2 guys in the exact same race that both had different parts in that car. One of them flipped over and was seriously injured. The other one ran into a tree and killed him.
Look, there's too much for it to be a coincidence.
Right? That's what I'm saying.
They talk about it slipping off of lifts and hurting people. And now, look, I understand. Look, I get this. Because I keep thinking of this. It's almost like if you've told something bad's going to happen, then you're looking for something bad to happen, and then maybe subconsciously you don't understand that you do some things and it causes it to happen, and you're like, oh, that was because that thing's bad luck. They told me to be careful.
Yeah.
And I understand how that could build. But the way this thing goes, there's so much that involves it. It's almost too much to be a coincidence. There really is something going on, which makes me wonder, what was the whole story before Dean got the car? What was the story behind the car for that?
I think he bought it when it was brand new, and he had it custom modified and things, and that was it. But I'm with you. I mean, what?
Yeah, there's so much.
The people building it, what could they have done? Now, you might think that was the most evil car that's ever been around in the United States, but you'd be wrong. The most evil car in America was a 1964 Dodge 330 limited edition, which is simply referred to as the Golden Eagle. Now, this vehicle apparently began its life as a police car at Old Orchard Beach, Maine, and quickly amassed for itself a rather ominous and unsettling reputation. Now, supposedly, 3 officers were in possession of the car during its years of police service, and every single one of them went on to brutally murder their families before eventually killing themselves. Now, subsequent owners of the car reported all manner of strange occurrences, possibly life-threatening malfunctions, such as engine stalling without reason, the steering wheel jamming, and the brakes giving out. In one instance, the doors suddenly flung themselves open while the vehicle was in motion. And then there were stories that people who would even try to vandalize this car would have trouble. Now, allegedly in the 1980s and 1990s, a series of would-be vandals had met a variety of horrific fates, ranging from being struck by lightning to dying in terrible car accidents, with one even apparently beheaded by a semi. Now, even more disturbing are the stories of at least 2 children who were hit by cars in the vicinity of the Golden Eagle, and their bodies flung through the air to come to rest on either the bumper or to the hood of the car. Now, another story from 2007 claims that one child who touched the car went on to kill his entire family and burn down their house, although this story was never proven. And the car's sinister reputation grew to the point to where in 2010 some local churches became convinced that it was inhabited by a demon, and they had it dismantled and the parts scattered in far-flung places. The car's current owner, a writer and publisher by the name of Wendy Allen, tried to go about tracking down all the pieces to reassemble it, though, but it doesn't look like they had any success. So, that's crazy, right? 3 different police officers that were in possession of this car while it was in the Maine's police service. All of them killed their families and then killed themselves? That's a little odd, right?
Yeah.
A young boy that touches it does the same thing. Once again, multiple people have problems while driving this thing. The doors open on its own. The brakes don't work. The steering wheel jams. The car stalls. Even people that try to vandalize it have problems. One guy was beheaded, it said. It's a possessed car. I mean, it's just like the movie Christine, but
Yes.
it's real, right?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. I don't know, but let's move on. Now, in addition to these possessed cars, there's also tales of spectral cars. Have you heard of these? And
Yes. Yeah. I have. Yes.
And this doesn't just take place in the United States. Like, for instance, this first one we're going to talk about took place in the former Soviet Union, and this car was known as the Black Volga. Now, during the 1960s and 1970s, an intimidating jet black Volga limousine with white rims, tinted windows, curtains, horns on its rear view mirrors, and this thing was described as completely spotless. And it had the ability to accelerate faster than any normal car. It was said to roam about all over the Soviet Union, and in some cases even Belarus, the Ukraine, Poland, and Mongolia, terrorizing locals wherever it went. The tale goes that the phantom Black Volga would appear from seemingly out of nowhere to pull up to people, mostly children, and eventually abduct them. Anyone who tried to interfere in this dark business, or to even come too close, was said to either drop dead on the spot or within 24 hours of the encounter, making this mysterious vehicle a sight that instilled great fear in anyone who laid eyes upon it. In some stories, the car is said to be impervious to damage as well. Though these spooky stories are scary, no one was ever able to see who was driving the car or cars. This led to rampant speculation over who could possibly be behind the wheel. Now that's crazy, right?
Yeah, completely.
Now, one of the 1960s reports from the Ukraine told of a mysterious black car pulling up to 2 young girls, after which the door opened, and the 2 were seemingly sucked into the vehicle as if they were in a vacuum cleaner. The witness, a middle-aged man, ran to their aid and pried the driver's side door open, notably not dropping dead, like the lore suggested he should. And when the door was finally opened, the witness was able to see that indeed there was no one behind the wheel at all, and that the front of the car was completely empty. That was about all that he was able to ascertain before there was allegedly a blinding white flash, and the man woke up 24 hours later with a terrible headache. So what is that?
That's almost like what is like a UFO that's like that. It's just taking the shape of that. It's an alien
That's
craft.
an interesting thought. You're 100% right. I never thought of that. You're right. It appears to abduct people. Everybody apparently in the area, Poland and Belarus and Kazakhstan or wherever, southern Russia and the neighboring countries, they were all terrified of this thing. So they don't even think it necessarily was one car. It might have been more than one, but no one was driving it. It would show up. It would abduct people. What is that? I'm with you. Is it like some other form of intelligence that's just cloaking its craft or a vehicle to make it look like an earthly vehicle? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what it seems like.
It's exactly, man, it's hard to, okay, look. these are, I can't, I don't even know how to separate. You know, you're talking about, you see like some phantom specter thing or what they're like, but then you start talking about the possessions and all this stuff. It's on two totally different levels that may actually be the same thing.
Yeah. There's more. Have you ever heard of the Phantom Bus of London?
No.
Okay, check this out. In 1934, a London motorist suddenly performed an emergency swerve while driving along Cambridge Gardens. He died a horrible death when his car hit a wall and exploded in the flames. Although no reason for his behavior could be found, many witnesses stepped forward and offered a potential reason for the poor driver's demise: the Phantom Bus of London. Allegedly, seen by many London natives between the 1930s and the 1990s, the Ghost Bus is a very real-looking red London double-decker carrying the line number 7. It always appears at a certain point at 1:15 a.m., thundering along the road straight towards terrified drivers. Its lights are never on, and no driver is ever visible. As the panicked drivers steer to narrowly avoid collision and turn to look behind them, the bus is nowhere to be seen or heard. So this is a phantom bus that people are constantly seeing. Between 1930s and 1990s, numerous sightings, hundreds of sightings of this thing. Always at the same time.
And it's enough to where it looks so real.
It causes people to get
people
in wrecks.
to swerve.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean that people always die, but it causes a wreck, right?
That's really strange.
It's pretty crazy. Check this one out. It all began on that dark December Sunday night in 2002, when a member of the public reported seeing a car lose control and leave the highway around 100 meters before the emergency slip road at Burfam. Police were called to the scene to search for the wreckage, but were unable to find any trace of a crash. That was until an officer stumbled upon an old maroon Vauxhall Astra, nose down in a ditch, covered in undergrowth. Now that doesn't seem that strange, but that's not the strangest part. The car appeared to not have crashed recently. In fact, it had laid undiscovered for several months. This was confirmed by the additional discovery of a decomposed body nearby. Now, hysteria greeted the findings, and it was suggested in the national press that the sighting of the car leaving the road just the night before could only have been a ghostly replay of the fatal crash that apparently happened a year earlier. Now, this view is not shared by the Surrey police, and with a spokeswoman insisting that the incident had only ever been treated as a regular road traffic collision, and the fact that the car was obscured by leaves and branches most probably prevented it from being reported earlier. Even if motorists had spotted the vehicle, she said, they may have assumed that it had already been dealt with. The body was identified by dental records as that of a 21-year-old Christopher Brian Chandler from Middlesex, who had been on the run from the Metropolitan Police since earlier that year. Of course, he was wanted for robbery. So isn't that a crazy story? A person sees an accident.
Mm-hmm.
They call the police. The police go out there. They look around. They don't see any recent sign of an accident happening. They keep looking and looking, and eventually they do find a car.
Mm-hmm.
But the car has already been there for over a year. There's
Time
all
slipping.
kinds of overgrowth and everything all over it. Yeah, this accident apparently happened months, a year prior. So what is that? It's like they saw the replay of the thing.
Yeah. And we've discussed that too, where people seem like they see the replays, like we talked about. Like I remember covering a while back. I remember if it was on the Elite Show or not, where we talked about a truck being run off the road. They'd seen it, and they get up there and they're like, "I thought I saw a wreck." And you get to prodding around, and there's the same thing, overgrowth over something like that, where it's been there for a while.
Yeah. Now, not all possessions of cars and vehicles and stuff are necessarily evil, and not all of them are life-threatening. Some of them are just plain bizarre. In 2004, a family in Cape Town, South Africa, had a decidedly odd problem with their car. Now, after dinner with some friends that were from out of town, the family had gone to bed as if it was just any other usual night. But this time, their sleep would be interrupted by a thunderous roar and a crash from the outside. The startled family ran to their backyard to find their Renault, roving and hopping around the yard, smashing into bushes, trees, and fences, all while making a horrific roaring noise. It seemed to the obvious that it was someone trying to attempt to steal the car, but a look into the driver's window soon showed that there was no one behind the wheel. When the car stopped, as suddenly as it had sprung to life, it was found that there were no signs of a break-in. The windows were all intact. The doors were all still locked, and even the parking brake was still engaged. The perplexed family decided to call the police anyway, just in case. And when the officers arrived, they found no sign of anyone tampering with or neither the vehicle nor the perimeter of the house. And indeed, there were no traces of anyone who could have been driving it. As they listened to the family's frantic description of what they had seen, the skeptical police began to believe that the whole thing was just a big joke. However, just when the officers were about to leave, the car in question suddenly sprang back to life and proceeded to bounce up and down a hill until it smashed into a tree and eventually stopped. This left everybody in the vicinity utterly speechless. When the family contacted Renault, the company was very suspicious of the story and did believe a single word of it. The technical coordinator of the car company even went as far as to suggest that they had been drunk or that they were hallucinating. An examination of the car turned up nothing really out of the ordinary, but the family was told that a rusty starter cable may have caused the car to turn on by itself. But how would that cause the car to leap around, emitting a roaring noise? How would the car engage itself into park, drive, reverse? This case became known as the jumping car of Cape Town, and witnesses, including the police, saw the car start on its own and hop around the yard. The whole incident was widely covered in the news, so you could check it out yourself. But isn't that odd?
Look, I don't buy the rusty cable. I don't buy that. Because if so, then how come more cars aren't doing it? Why doesn't that happen all the time? Why aren't there older cars just starting up and taking off?
Right?
It's because that's not how it works.
Very interesting, I thought, right? I got one more here, and I'm going to end it on this. This comes from a book I read called Haunted Pennsylvania, Ghosts and Strange Phenomena of the Keystone State, and it was written by Patty Wilson, and I'll put links to it in the show notes if you want to check out that book. But this story that she wrote in this book is about her own brother and his Mustang, that she believes his own Mustang seemed hell-bent on trying to kill him. Let's check it out. In 1981, my brother Terry purchased an old red Mustang that had caught his eye at the local dealership. It was certainly not a practical car, for he had 5 children, but something about the car appealed to him, and he bought it anyways. The car handled well enough in the beginning. My sister, who was 15 years old, was also fascinated with the vehicle. It was built in the same year that she was born. At first, my brother used to tease her and tell her that when he was done with the car, he would give it to her. But then he began to hedge when she asked about the vehicle. One night, Terry and I were sitting in the kitchen, talking, and he confided to me that there was something terribly wrong with the car. It seemed that about a month earlier, the township he had been doing road work in had rerouted traffic so that it ran along a highway that actually ran through a local cemetery. There were retaining walls on both sides of the highway to hold back the graves. When they built the road, they actually had to move graves further up the hill, and it was those graves that had threatened to slide down from time to time. Terry told me that each time he drove through the cemetery, the car seemed to try and swerve into the retaining walls. He said it was as though someone else grabbed the steering wheel and stomped their foot down on the gas. He had to wrestle for control of the steering wheel on several occasions, and he had come within inches of striking the retaining wall. Our older brother, Jerry, was known for his mechanical ability, and he pulled the braking system apart several times, but could find nothing wrong with it. He replaced the steering column and checked every conceivable possibility, but could find nothing wrong with the vehicle. Furthermore, as you stayed away from that road that ran through the cemetery, the car did not seem to have any problems. But as soon as they took the car into that old cemetery road, it again tried to strike the retaining wall. It was as if someone else had control of the car, or the car had a mind of its own. Now, eventually, Terry parked the car because he was afraid to drive it. He put the car in storage and left it there for several years. I know that on several occasions he got the car out and tried to drive it through the cemetery, but each time the car reacted as though someone else wanted him to run into that wall. Finally, Terry made arrangements for the car to be crushed at a local junkyard. He was afraid that the pretty little car would be spared by someone in the junkyard in its last moments, and so he actually made arrangements to make sure he watched the car get crashed. For a man who loved vintage cars, this had to be difficult. But Terry believed that there was something significantly wrong with that vehicle. Anytime I hear stories of vehicles that drive themselves, or of cursed or haunted cars, I remember riding in that little red Mustang. And I remember the fear on my brother's face when he told me why the car had to be destroyed. And we're back with expanded perspectives. Hope you enjoyed those stories of these possessed vehicles, cars specifically. Very interesting stuff. Now, I know in the past I've heard of other stories about like ghost or phantom trains that have been seen, things like that. But that woman's story is odd, right? I mean, and at least her brother was smart enough that he didn't want to sell the Mustang to somebody else because he thought that somebody else would become injured or the car would try to kill somebody else. So he's like, no, I want to make sure I watch the car destroyed.
Exactly, yeah.
But how odd is that, you know, that they tore the thing apart looking for problems. There's nothing there. And every time he takes it to that cemetery, that's when it happens. And even put it up for a couple of years. Got it out. Thinking maybe it would wear off. Drives to the cemetery again. It's trying to force its way into that wall.
It doesn't make any sense, man. It really doesn't. And this is one of those things that it makes no sense.
My question is, though, is the car really possessed in this circumstance? Because it doesn't have any other problem except when he's in that cemetery. Or is, for whatever reason, a spirit in that cemetery notices that car, and that's why it tries to force people to... I mean, maybe it does that to every red Mustang that drives through there.
You're right. Maybe it does. I didn't think of that. Yeah, you're right.
Maybe someone is buried in that cemetery that her brother is unaware of, that has like a beef with him or something. a problem, and it wants to kill him. I don't know, right?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe like you said, somebody there is buried that had a car like that, and that's their unfinished business. They want that car.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, moving on. Cam, I know we spoke to the people on the Elite show last week about some of the new gadgets we've gotten, but let's go ahead and let everybody else know. We got some new toys here in studio. We got some new cameras, and we've been mentioning this for a while now, but we are working through them. We are sorting them out. We're trying to figure out how to render very good quality videos to start putting those out as well. I think we're going to take baby steps at first. What we're trying to do is we would like to produce a show once a month. And this show once a month is going to be like Expanded Perspectives Monthly Roundup, where we're going to look back at all the previous episodes that we had done on the show as well as the Elite show. And we kind of discuss, because lots of times we do stories, and then people will send us emails and new information based on the stories. And I really never get a chance to go back and discuss it openly about, what other people's thoughts are in there. And I think we're also going to include a portion on that show where people can email us questions, and we'll answer the questions on air. So that would be interesting.
I think we'll be able to pull that off. I mean, it'll just be one of those things too. We can kind of get more personal with that whole thing of talking to the people that send us messages on Facebook. We'll do it on the video thing of us sitting in here.
Yeah. Now I don't know if we're releasing these on iTunes or just like YouTube or something, or maybe both. But I do think we get a lot of emails from people that they want to see us doing what we're doing in studio, and so this would be the first time, because there's really not that many photographs of me and you out there, but now we're going to actually have video, right? It's our faces.
There's a reason. It's my face.
Anyways, we'll be looking into that. We'll keep you updated, but hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll start releasing these videos. That'll be interesting. Like I said, I'm still working out the kinks, trying to figure out how to get it to work. Never really dabbled with video that much. But anyways, we got a few shout-outs, Cam?
I've got one in particular. Thanks for everybody's been sending us emails. My goodness, we've been bombarded with emails, with messages. Folks, we're going to try to get back to you as much. I can't say slacked up. We've been overwhelmed with them. If we haven't gotten back to you, we're going to try. Yeah. We're going to go through them. Please bear with us. We've been hammered. But we got one in particular, someone who likes to have a couple of drinks. We'd like to just give a quick shout-out to Mechanic Mike and the Porch crew. Thanks so much for listening, for turning on your friends to the whole thing, the whole deal. Thanks to everybody for just supporting the show, for being here, for letting us know what you think, for sending us ideas. I mean, you'll bombard us. It's like having it really is. It's like having a big family reunion. We all get together and we all sit around, have a few drinks, have something to eat. We all discuss it, everybody. And I love getting the emails from everybody and the messages on Facebook to see all the walks of life of everybody. It doesn't matter, rich or poor. It doesn't matter anything about that. It doesn't matter where you work, what you do. It's your interest in this fun subject matter. That's what makes it great. And I think that's what's so awesome is we get to really see it, is you really share it. I mean, is everybody's all walks of life that we've got contact from that you're like, that is awesome. I mean, it covers the whole spectrum. I mean, if you're a human being, you're interested in these strange subjects.
And I like how all the information is received. I mean, everybody, whether it's Facebook, other than YouTube, seems to be, nice. It's okay to have a difference of opinions or form your own theories. Well, I think it's this way. And it's interesting to even discuss that without people being negative. Like, oh, that's ridiculous, Yeah. Like I said, YouTube, you get that. But even on Facebook and everything and the emails we get, nobody really seems to, there's no hate. And that's what I enjoy.
No, yeah.
There shouldn't be. We explore unusual topics, and it's fun to contemplate and ponder these crazy subjects. I mean, just like today. I mean, I have no idea whether these ghostly cars are real.
Or how it can even happen.
Exactly.
I have no idea, but I'm fascinated by it. The idea of it. The idea I get to mull around in my head is, how is it like I said, I get at a loss of words for times because I don't know, and it drives me crazy.
And I'm glad that we could all get together here on Expanded Perspectives and have these thoughts. If you have any stories of your own you would like to share and you haven't done so already, you can email the show, expandedperspectives@yahoo.com. You can also rate and review the show for us on iTunes if you want to help us out. And don't forget, if you're not an Elite member already, you could sign up for Expanded Perspectives Elite. Just go to the website, expandedperspectives.com. Click on the Elite tab in the top right. Signing up is pretty easy. On the last episode, we did a special episode, an anniversary of Travis Walton being abducted. And most of you have seen the movie Fire in the Sky. We talk about it. It was the 40-year anniversary. It just happened last week. So if you want to catch that episode as well as many, many others, go ahead and sign up now. $5 a month. That's not too bad. The price of what, like 3 tacos at Taco Bell?
Sure.
And you get 70-something episodes. Anyways, we got some bad news moving on. Friend of the show, a friend of ours, Lon Strickler. his wife, Vanessa, sadly lost her battle with cancer this last week. So our heart goes out to Lon and his family. Hang in there, brother. You can support Lon by going to his website, phantomsandmonsters.com. It's an excellent website, and we just feel so bad for him. Cam, you got anything else?
Nope, I don't have anything else. Just heavy heart. That's all it is. Just a sad, sad day.
All right, that just about wraps this up. I hope everybody has a wonderful week. Don't work too hard. For you elite members, we'll speak to you on Thursday. For everybody else, we'll speak to you next Monday. Have a good one. I'm Kyle Filson. He's Cam Hale. We are Expanded Perspectives.
Peace.